In Sweden, there's a building that is named the Oscarian Opera in Operan. And just as a reminder, and to shine some perspective on this, remember that we have the Kleksinski Federal Building in Chicago, and they got to use power tools. They had proper construction training, and we were all here to see it. And that took us 14 years to build. So now let's go back to this opera house in Sweden. Apparently, there was an opera house before this one, which is absolutely insane. And this is the original opera house. But I'm just gonna go with it so we can destroy this narrative. This is where we're told, for the first opera house, that Sweden finally had their own opera singer because they found a music academy. So Sweden figured out what music was, and now they need a place to show it off. And here is where things get very interesting. At some point in 1775, construction began. While living in huts and without a power tool in sight, the Royal Swedish Opera was completed less than 7 years later. They supposedly knocked this thing out twice as fast as our civilization took to build this pathetic box. And their way of transportation was a donkey. I thought that we were evolving and advancing. So let's continue. We are given Axel Johan Anderberg as the architect, who designed this palace and constructed it all by himself, which is a total joke that they never mentioned that anyone ever helped these incredible master drawing characters that we, for some strange reason, can't reproduce today. So to show you all what's going on here, I'm gonna make this very simple. Since they make us bounce around from page to page to get this information, we are being told that Axel, the architect of the current opera house, that somehow replaced the original 1782 opera house, where we, of course, don't have any pictures of, and in my opinion, is the same building, was selected because he was the only person in the world that could get this job done. Oh, wait, what is this? There were so many people that could get this job done that Axel Anderberg had to win a contest against all of the other 1700s master builders of Sweden? Can you believe this? Another contest winner with the architecture of the gods flowing through his veins. I would love to see where this guy lived. I'm sure it was a shed or a hut, since this is what we were told about the 17 and 1800s. Not palaces and massive opera houses that last forever. So the first opera house is done in 7 years. No pictures of that one. And they demolish it because it was very easy back in the 1700s for some reason to get this type of building constructed again, and even better than the first one. So they did it in their spare time, of course. So how long does this one take to get Opera House number 2 done? Well, let's check out their website, where they tell us a major key as to why I believe that this is the same building. They did not knock any building down. They didn't build 2 opera houses. This is the only one. The first one took almost 7 years to build. How long do you think the second one took to build? If you guessed the exact same amount of time, almost 7 years, well, you're the winner. Welcome to episode 50 of my lunch break. I hope you're all having a great day. And if you're new, welcome. And I want to thank all of our sponsors over on Patreon. Thank you to FlatEarthDave.com. You can check out his app. I'll put the link in the description, and you can use my referral code, MLB. The app is awesome. It shows a lot of videos that are really hard to find. They've got them all in great playlists. He also has my lunch break on the homeschool section of the app, which is really cool. Thank you for that. Thank you to Rebecca Kay, Don Gaston, Jason Brunson, Christopher Arietta, The Lady Lacey Show, David and Sherry Ferguson, Edwin Johnson, Chuck Templeton, Edwin Rice, Joy Lee, Leslie Pipkins, PNR, Stephanie Nolan, The Burlesons, Suez KC, Dan Woodall, Corey Franks, Dale, DJ Clicktrack, Edward and Brianna, Jacob Law, Jim Ribley and Christine Duggan, Kyle Glascock, Maddie B and Never the Prez, Tim Rack, Two Spirit, William Richard Jeffries V, and Zach Bronco. You guys are all awesome and helping this channel out a lot. Okay, so I have a few more things to say about this opera house before we move on. Because of course we can't leave out the fire story that we have heard so many times, and are the nod that these buildings are from the past civilization. During the years where the first opera house which in my opinion is the exact same opera house, but during the years where the first one was being destroyed and the new one was being built, the Swedish National Theater that was being used burned down in a fire. And one more thing, to really drive this thing home for everyone. This so-called new opera house underwent a renovation. They say that it was nearly impossible to make out the subjects of the artwork in the stairwell inside the building because of all the smoke from the outside of the building, from the city, accumulated in just 91 years. So 91 years, and you can't even tell what the paintings were on the inside because of the smoke from the city on the outside. What are they even talking about here? This is a clear cover-up, that this was the original building. This is Opera House number 1. And those paintings were from the previous civilization. How much clearer could this get? And of course, they were restored to the exact same condition it was in the inaugural ceremony. Yeah, sure it was. Let me know what you think about that one. You all know what I think about that. Let's stay here in Sweden for now and take a look at the Riddarholmen Church, where we are told that we have located one of the oldest buildings in Stockholm. So this should be fun. And after what I just found, you'll all enjoy this one. Knowing what we know, after 49 episodes and now 50, we know here that any construction project going on before the 1800s that looks like this is basically a laughing matter. We know from the AI ChatGPT what kind of manpower and what requirements would be necessary for something like this to actually take place and be constructed, and then go on to last forever, unlike anything we've ever constructed today, 200 plus years later. So 1800s is a stretch. 1700s, basically forget about it. It becomes nearly impossible, based on what the mainstream history tells us, that they rode on horses and suffered in the winters. Pulling granite, stone, brick, and the rest through muddy roads would be insane. Then each horse needs 10 gallons of water per day. So you'll have all of these things that the mainstream narrative blatantly ignores all over the world, every single time. They tell us that this church was constructed in the year 1300, over 700 years ago, before Sweden ever even wrote their first book, which happened 183 years after this building was constructed. It is so backwards, it's unbelievable. How can anyone look at this stuff anymore and say, yeah, that all adds up? It 100% does not add up. It's logistically impossible. It isn't realistic. This is their website. They literally just say it was completed around the year 1300. Could have been. It might be, but who knows? Now, we all know that this is a lie. They're making up a random date, and people just believed it for years, until now. So they say that 725 years ago, they're over in Sweden knocking this thing out. With perfection, of course. Now, I've emailed the old Treasury building on Spring Street in Melbourne, Australia, and what they emailed me back should get anyone thinking. I asked them a basic question, something that they should be able to provide, since the camera was invented in 1816. And they tell us that this building was constructed in less than 4 years, from 1858 to 1862. Now, the question I asked them was, do you have any construction photos? They replied saying that there's a couple photos attached. Unfortunately, these are the only ones that we have from the construction. Now let's take a look at these photos for a second. There are some very strange things going on here. First of all, this building is not being constructed. It's clearly constructed. And I put an arrow in this photo, pointing at the right side of the building, because it's clearly being dug out of the dirt. This is not the way anyone would ever construct a building today, or ever. And I want to make this point very clear. So I sent the photo back to them with the arrow in there and said, just looking at the photo you sent over, was it originally built with the dirt covering that right side of the building? A reply that should shock anyone and at least begin to show anyone in the world that there is something seriously wrong with the history that we have been told. They replied saying that it was originally built with the dirt covering the right side of the building. Due to the rise and the fall of the land, the building is submerged. The rise and the fall of the land? I'm sorry, what? The south and east sides are fully exposed. So what we call the basement, the lowest level, is technically on ground level. In other words, they had to dig this thing out of the dirt. What we call the ground floor is elevated above the street level. So from one side, it looks like we have 3 floors, and from the other side, it looks like we have 4 floors. I'm sorry, but this is insane. Take a look at this photo that they sent over again. There is clearly a digging process going on here. They are removing this building from the mud flood, in my opinion, and they admit it without even knowing it. The way that the building sits today is exactly how you would construct it. You would build a foundation and then construct the building. You wouldn't build the building into the dirt. And I'd be willing to bet, after all of my research, that this building has a few more basements under the ground that we just aren't being told about. And before we go on, I've been wanting to show everyone this photo for a while. This is Mont Saint-Michel in France. This photo was taken in 1925. Now, on the ground, you can see there is a railroad track in the dirt. Railroad tracks need to be screwed into wood. If they were constructed in our timeline, just like this picture, you can see the wood because we constructed it. Now, the train was basically brand new to the world at this point, so we should be able to see the wood planks in this photo. They are completely covered up by the dirt. The only thing sticking out is the railroad tracks from, in my opinion, the previous civilization. And we are reusing their technology. This entire area was dug out of the dirt. You can see where the previous ground level was, here off to the right-hand side. This is an incredible structure, very clearly a place that was built by the previous civilization, considering Paris City Vision lets us know that this was built before cowboys and Indians. In fact, they tell us that it was built over 1,100 years before cowboys and Indians. In the year 708, very casually knocking this one out in the year 708. Any year would have worked, honestly. 706, 707 would have also been a winning number. Anything goes if you're the mainstream narrative, until now. Because we all know that this is just ridiculous and a complete lie. The logistics in building this before anyone even knew how to make paper is complete nonsense. 708. Wow. Oh, and did I forget to mention that this thing is in the middle of the water? Did I leave that part out? Well, yeah, it's in the middle of the water. And we are supposed to just believe that they had a great shipping company, an architect, a financial guy that would make sure that they had this all covered in the year 708. Oh, and it of course lasts forever. With 0 issues and not one flaw in the construction. It's perfect, unlike anything that we have ever constructed today. How does the mainstream history make any sense at all at this point? You cannot go from this in 708 to evolving and advancing into sheds. And now we build Motel 6s. It's crazy. How can anyone ever go into a history class again without laughing? The year 708 was just a year of brilliance, I guess. Yeah, right. These buildings are from the previous civilization, and more people are realizing this every single day. And once you know, you know. You don't go back to thinking that the year 708 built massive structures on a cliff in the middle of the water with a train that just pulls right up to the front door. And I was on Google Maps just looking around and saw this city in Italy. And I went down to the street view and I saw that they have this fountain. The whole city clearly was found, repurposed, and is being used today. And as we spin this camera view around, we are going to see a griffin right above their front door. So we see the Tartaria logo all over the world. And then I was going to show you these door frames. Look at the size of the people compared to the size of the door frame. The wood door is obviously our work. The stone frame is from the past civilization. The size of the people were at least double. Why build a door frame this big? Well, you would because the people were bigger. Today, we construct standard door frames at 96 inches for newer homes, which is 8 feet. We can all agree this man is probably 5'10", so let's say 6 feet to round it up. The existing door is double his size, let alone the entire stone frame. It's massive. It's at least 15 feet high. So I spin the camera around, and of course, they're doing construction, because what would these buildings do without our help? And you can see this lady here. Look at how small she is in comparison to this door frame. You can see our small entrance that we have built here at the bottom. This is the door size for us. Why would a civilization that is struggling through winters, riding around on horses and wagons, go out of their way to construct a door frame that are 15 to 20 feet high? When we are supposedly bigger than they were, they show us Civil War outfits where they're like half our size. Using common sense, The narrative is backwards. It's clearly lying to us. They understood construction and were very good at it. It lasts forever. And they built their door frames proportionate to their size, the exact way that we do. What an interesting city. Especially when we stay here in this city and look at the Rocca Polina, a fortress that was built in less than 3 years, like 500 years ago. How can the narrative get away with this? They can't have this technology and then go live in sheds and have cowboys and Indians too. It can't have both. Either humans knew how to build or they didn't. The whole Abe Lincoln being born in a shed thing is just nonsense. That was over 300 years after they were knocking out this fortress. In just 3 years. So in 300 years, they forget everything? Or are we evolving and advancing? Which one is it? In my opinion, these narratives are nonsense. They are lies. The dates are all over the place. Just because a building is built in a different location of the world doesn't mean the narrative gets a pass. If a cell phone is created, the whole world advances. If a plane is created, the whole world gets the plane. The USA supposedly broke away from Europe. In the process of breaking away in the 1700s, did they all forget their brain? No. This was the start of the worldwide reset, in my opinion. An event took place right before this that started our entire worldwide narrative over. And we're seeing through their nonsense now. So this fortress is insane. And if anyone is there and can send me photos of what I'm about to read, please email me. Here we go. They destroyed a large number of Roman medieval buildings in order to build this fort, including houses, as well as over 100 tower houses, destroying gates and churches and monasteries. And here we go for the part that shows there is much, much more to this city. And honestly, the whole world below our feet. A civilization was here before us that was incredible. It turned the former city streets of the historic city center into underground passageways, which are now open to the public. Unbelievable. If anyone can get in those underground tunnels, please send me any photos you can. I'm also on X if you want to send it to me on there. I am definitely adding this city to my list that I want to go to and investigate for this channel. And like I said earlier, the reset happened, in my opinion, around the time that the USA and the Australian governments were founded. So in the mid-1800s, of course, something happens here in Italy because this is a worldwide operation, a synchronized mission to control the masses. I believe that we are much more powerful than we are told. I think we have energy that they want. And by demoralizing us, and basically stealing our energy, it benefits them. It adds to their sick game of power and control. So in the mid-1800s, the fortress was partially destroyed and rebuilt. But in 1860, of course, only 12 years after they supposedly built it again, it was demolished and the Kingdom of Italy took over. I'm surprised that they didn't say that it burned down in a random fire, since they love to say that stone burns down in fires, which it doesn't. So in 1932, they go down into these tunnels and destroy whatever was there that they don't want us to see, as it would ruin their narrative in a second. And they call it a restoration, when we know that restoration really means destruction. And another destruction project in 1965. And guess what? They left us a wall to look at. Incredible. So I hope this clears up more for everyone, that the history that we've been told and forced to repeat over and over, generation after generation, is a lie. And they just throw dates around, and everyone just believed it for years. It doesn't matter what date they say. Nobody was there to verify it. And stone doesn't change the way that wood does over time. So if a building, or in this case an arch, is built 100 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, if it was built in New York, or in Italy, nobody would know the difference. So in this story, they're gonna tell us that this arch right here was built by people that were about 1,100 years away from creating paper. 2,300 years ago, we are told that this arch was made in the second half, not the first half, the second half, because they're gonna get specific now. So the second half of the 3rd century BC, which is 300 years before we started counting years the way that we do. So then they restore it in 40 BC, not 41 or 42 or 39, but exactly 40. And we fully trust that. Oh, we don't? No, we don't. especially when they can't tell us the logistics of a building from the 1800s. There was no restoration project going on in 40 BC, 2063 years ago. And yet again, we are given a doorway that, in my opinion, was not built thousands of years ago. This is possibly only a few hundred years old and shows the size that the people really were. The arch is part of a massive set of walls, which are 30 feet tall and 9,500 feet long, covering approximately a quarter of a square mile, over 3 hills, built in the year -300. Yeah, right. So I began the episodes talking a lot about the USA, and it's a great starting point for this subject because it clearly shows how ridiculous the mainstream lie really is, and how these structures are all over the USA when they shouldn't be. And I'm going to continue to show the USA buildings for a long time, but we are now at the point where we are all very knowledgeable about the timeline and the details that are necessary for a perfect construction process, especially one that lasts forever. But I am now also going to be getting into the narrative of other countries and continents in future episodes, like we did today in Italy. Because the narrative in the USA is relatively recent. It's in the last 300 years, and we have proven how insane those narratives are. How repetitive with fake characters and fake fires, false logistical processes, or the lack of telling us that there was ever a logistical process, and so much more, time and time again. But now in the rest of the world, we get thousands of years to work with, and it's going to become laughable. The mainstream history is done. It's going to take the narrative that we have shredded in the first 50 episodes and burn it. And we have a short bonus for today. In episode 47, we talked about the Stone Sea in St. Louis, and we discussed that they are technology. And I want to go a little deeper here and make a connection and say that, in my opinion, these are from the past civilization. They are being hidden by this cafeteria that the museum doesn't even need, since like 10 people are walking around it all day. But they clearly know the technology that these stone structures hold. I believe they recreated this technology, and I believe that the St. Louis Arch is a much bigger, possibly much more powerful recreation of this technology, being hidden behind the blinds in the basement. Where else in the world do you see these arches? And what are the odds that these are right next to each other? We have proven that they are attempting, and seems like it's successful, that they are able to extract an energy from the earth in this location. What is under the ground in this location? And what is the true meaning of the St. Louis Arch? The patterns and repetition. We are getting closer and closer to the truth. I want to thank all the badge members, the Patreons, and subscribers. You are all helping this channel out a lot. I'm planning a lot of cool things over the next year that I'm really excited to share with everyone. We know that one of the nods is the fire story. We have found that pattern here on this channel. And we have also found that they create characters, fake names, and that it is most likely through AI because the repetition is overwhelmingly obvious. And we all remember from episode 47 when Henry Hobson Richardson was off building F.L. Ames gates, memorial halls, libraries, and cottages. F.L. Ames. F.L. Ames. Well, we all know what F.L.A.M.E.S. spells. Putting the word flames right in the narrative. Putting the period after the F and the L so that we can't search it. Putting this right in our faces over and over and thinking that nobody would ever see it. Thinking that nobody would ever be locked into their code and that nobody would ever put their lies right on the table for all to see.